Hello, this is Joshua for Frost Dragon Designs, and today I'd like to talk to you about my Pyromancer Fire Mage Hard Enamel Pin. Each month in 2023, I will be releasing a new standalone Black Cat RPG design directly through my website and through my Etsy shop. The design for February is the Pyromancer, so let's get into the design. You can see from this quick little pen sketch I did before I started that the key features of the design were going to be flaming hair, a multi-pronged spear-type weapon, pointy shoulder guards, perhaps a cape. I really wanted it to feel like a sharp design with a lot of imposing, pointy pieces to it. There's also a little sketch of a little Phoenix companion pin, which I did not end up doing, but I might at some point in the future if I decide to do some more mini pins. When we started working digitally, we started working just from the basic cat head that I use for all of my Black Cat RPG designs. You can see it's moving kind of quickly in the direction of the fire hair. Part of the reason that it's moving quickly is because this is sped up. I think it's 32 times the speed that I was working. One of the reasons that I really wanted to do a Pyromancer or a Fire Mage is because in a lot of games, you can't really go so specific with one type of magic for how you build your character. Any game that has any sort of monsters with resistance, you're kind of punished if you go only in one element. So if you're a fire mage, you're eventually going to come up against something with fire resistance or immunity, and that's no good. But for the purpose of these standalone pins, I'm not really trying to capture a specific game. I'm really just trying to capture some fantasy characters that I think would be cool in the style of my Black Cat RPGs pins. A few seconds ago in this pin design, you could see I had two versions of it side by side. One of them had the rounded feet, one of them had the pointy feet. I was trying to figure out whether I wanted this to be a male or female character. I ended up going with a female character, mostly because, as I had said previously, the key features in that little sketch I had were all pointy, sharp kind of things. And I've developed this form language for all of my Black Cat RPG designs. If the character has pointy hands and pointy feet, it is meant to be a female. If they have rounded hands and rounded feet, it is meant to be a male. That's just the form language of how I do for all of these pins in this project. So with it wanting to be a pointy design to begin with, it just made sense that this would be a female character. So as I continue to work on this design, I'm keeping, fire as an element in mind as I'm working on any piece of this. It was actually really fun, and I think at some point in the future, if this does well, I might do mages for other specific elements. But the reason that I chose fire as the first one to work on is really because I feel like of all of the kind of elements that you could build around, fire's the one that has the most visceral response of danger in my mind. Ice and cold can be just as deadly, if not more, but it just doesn't have that, if I look at a flame, I know to not touch it, to be careful around it. If I look at an ice cube, maybe I'm thinking that I need to cool off my drink. It's kind of similar with some of the other things. Like, you could have a wind mage that obviously would be extremely deadly. You could have arcane or something of that nature. I just really liked the idea of fire, and especially since a lot of times people don't make fire-specific things because in a lot of RPGs, fire resistance or fire immunity is very common. So you can have one or two fire spells, but you can't build around it. But I really wanted this character to be all about fire. That's the whole aesthetic of what's going on for this character. Everything's pointy, everything's sharp, everything's, flickering around. That's the feeling I was going for. Up to this point in the design, I was mostly sticking with red and gray as the costume colors. And those are great colors. It kind of reminds me of embers, coal, that sort of thing. But I felt like it kind of weighed the design down. Something about it felt heavier than I wanted it to feel. Fire to me has always felt light. And that makes sense. I mean, it literally is, luminous. So I wasn't quite sure about the color scheme. It felt too heavy, too dark, too grounded. At one point you saw I kind of flashed through some colors for different parts of it. Some of it looked nice, some of it didn't. I even at one point I think had the, instead of a black cat, it was like a fire colored cat. That didn't quite work. But what I ended up finding that I liked was this kind of, it's like a deep cream color that I used as the accent to the reds. And I really feel like that lightened up the design and helped it really have more of the feel that I wanted it to have. But as I continued working, something still wasn't sitting right with me. And I think it was the stance, the pose. It really had much more of a grounded, locked, standing in the way kind of feeling to it than this type of character had in my head, like when I just was trying to envision what this character might be like. So what you see I end up doing is, instead of the stance with the legs spread apart and firmly planted, I went with the legs are now together, and it really makes the character feel like they're more floating or, flying or hovering or something of that nature, which is cool because it adds yet another magical type element to it. And I feel like it also kind of adds a bit more to how dynamic the pose feels. They don't feel like they're stiff-legged or stuck there. They're now, they're displaying their power. They're up floating in the air. The fire's flickering all around them. And, like if this were a cinematic scene, this would be like a really awesome scene and pose, in my opinion. Even though it's a very simple pose, they're just floating there with their arms out. But I really feel like it is more emblematic of the character I had in mind that I wanted to portray than the stance standing there with the legs spread out like that. So as I continued to work on the design and just refine the details, it really started to come together, and it almost has like a superhero feeling to it while still being very grounded in the fantasy aesthetic. This character looks like they would be right at home either in an RPG or in a comic book. I very briefly tried the idea of a flaming D10 in the one hand and then a flaming D10 in both hands. I didn't like that. I went right back to the staff, and I love how this design turned out. It looks so good. It went well beyond the expectations I had when I was working on the sketch for this. So I hope that you enjoy the Pyromancer design, and I'm looking forward to sharing more of these designs with you as we go throughout the year. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great day.